Okay, my friends, welcome once again to the next episode, Red Delta Project YouTube channel and live feed, where we're helping you break free of the diet and exercise rat race, particularly through the use of calisthenics training. I'm Matt Schiffley, as always, and today's episode is a special one because sometimes, you look back on the past ways that you used to do things, and you don't realize how much has changed until you're scrolling through old photos or videos or something of yourself, and you're like, holy smokes, I can't believe I was so much more like that, or how small I was, or big, or whatever. And this is in reflection of a little bit of some past looking perspective that I've had over the past couple of weeks, where I recognize all of the things that I used to do in attempt to, quote, science my way to success, science my way to muscle and strength, science my way to staying lean, and all these sorts of things. And of course, I'm using the word science as a verb, kind of like as they did in the movie The Martian. And it's naturally not a verb, but it got verbed, as the old Calvin and Hobbes reference was, verbing weirds language. And by science, what I'm recognizing is this attempt of trying to utilize these studies and research that comes out, and people are attempting to, quote, science their way, finding some sort of a hack, biohacking shortcuts, ways to sort of trick Mother Nature, as if there's some sort of a loophole in the works for building muscle or losing weight and stuff. And I want to first premise this with the statement that I'm not saying that I don't believe in the utilization of scientific research in fitness. I can certainly see people reading the title for this and being like, oh my gosh, Matt doesn't believe in any scientific inquiry or application in his methodology, to which I always respond as like, well, what else are you going to base your pursuit of fitness on? Like Ouija boards and magic 8-ball readings? Go to the tarot card reader and be like, what kind of food should I eat if I want to lose weight? Although I wouldn't put it past people. I once got gifted a book from a friend of mine of, here's your ultimate fitness plan based on your zodiac. So I was like, yeah, it's probably out there if you look for it enough. But of course you're using science. If anything, I would argue that most folks out there aren't using even close to enough scientific research and applications when it comes to really taking fitness to an effective and practical level. And that's because we often mistakenly think of fitness as being a physical endeavor. And we get lost in things like, okay, how does the body store fat? That's what we're going to focus on. How do we burn fat? If we want to lose weight, that's what we're going to focus on. How does your body build muscle? Why do you build muscle? So if I want to build muscle, obviously that's a thing I need to focus on. And yes, that is extremely important, but it's not even close to enough. And the reason for that is because understanding that fitness, first and foremost, is not a physical endeavor. It is a human endeavor. It is something that we human beings practice in practical application within our lives in an attempt to harness the natural processes of Mother Nature that are responsible for the adaptations of our body, and doing it through largely artificial means through our applications. And so what that means is that, yes, you can learn everything there is to know about weight loss, but if you also don't know the science of nutrition, you're still falling short. Being human beings, because it's a human endeavor, that means we need to learn a lot more about how people work rather than just how our body works, which means that you need to understand all of the touchy-feely subjective stuff that a lot of coaches love to sweep under the rug of. How do you feel? What's your attitude? What's your mentality? There's all those attitudes out there of like, doesn't matter how you feel, go to the gym anyway. I used to have that attitude. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because we are human beings practicing fitness. We have to take the entire holistic approach of human beings into account, which means how you feel is just as important as what you know about a proper diet. What you know about a proper diet is just as important as knowing how to cook healthy food. So a lot of folks out there have such a narrow perspective on their scientific discipline, on their approach to fitness, that they're leaving out all the other stuff that is also incredibly important. And that's why I often say that most folks aren't using nearly enough science, because you need to know, yes, how the body works, and you need to know about how we work as human beings, and we need to know about psychology and human behavior, and we need to know about nutrition, and we need to know about exercise science, and we need to know, and on and on and on and on. You can't just say, well, I know the best ways or how the body builds or stores and burns fat, so that's what I need to know about losing weight. No, that's not even close to enough. That's when you run into folks who will be like, okay, I know the best diet and the best workout program, but people aren't willing to do it. Nobody can stick to the program. Well, then it's a bad program, because it could work great for your body, but if it doesn't work for people as a human being, it's still going to fall short. So I want to get that little disclaimer out of the way first and foremost. And mostly what I'm talking about here in the terms of trying to, quote, science our way to results is when we use a very narrow range of research or scientific inquiry about how we work as far as physical beings, and we base everything on these narrow things. Okay, so let me give you some examples, right? For example, if you strength train and you build muscle, muscle is metabolically expensive. So naturally, if you have more muscle on your frame, then your metabolic process and you're going to burn more calories on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of coaches out there will tell you, oh, if you want to lose weight, you need to build muscle. Okay? So the science clearly shows this. You build muscle, metabolically expensive, you add X amount of muscle to your frame, your metabolic process and your metabolism increases. Therefore, that's the way to go. Here's another one that I fell for is, if you eat, you have something called a thermic effect of food, an increase in, again, your metabolism when you eat. So therefore, if you want to boost your metabolism, then you should eat smaller, more frequent meals. That's another one I fell for. Okay? Or your hormone profile is different at different times of the day. So therefore, you should do your strength training at the optimal times during the day. So that way you're working out when your hormones are best, and that's going to get you your best results. Excuse me, folks, still getting over a little bronchitis. So all of these little things are very tempting to really put a lot of faith into because they are technically true. They are scientifically valid. They are something that is factually correct. And some people build entire programs and entire approaches to weight loss and building muscle and stuff off of these things. And I used to do exactly the same sort of deal. And I'll give you even more examples here. But now it's very much not the case because I have a fundamental approach to fitness rather than just a very tiny approach based on a few scientific accuracies. And what that means is that it puts all of this stuff in proper context, because a lot of these things that are done in an attempt to, quote, science your success are ignoring a ton of nuance and a lot of context and are basically kind of like walking through funhouse mirrors. You walk in front of a funhouse mirror and what you're seeing is actually a reflection of yourself, but you're all warped and distorted and stretched out to the point where you can't actually say, that's what I look at, even though I am staring at my reflection. That's what a lot of these perspectives actually do. And I did this for years myself. I'll be sharing some of those stories with you here today. And what we need to do instead is put it into proper context. And when we do that, especially from a fundamental perspective, it not only helps you get much better results, but it takes a ton of stress off mind, body, and lifestyle. For example, right now, I don't care at all about my metabolism. I don't care about my heart rate zone or what zone I'm in when I'm doing cardio, when I go for a bike ride. I don't give a damn about my macronutrient ratios. I don't care about cortisol. I don't care about my inflammation levels. I don't care about my metabolism. I don't care if I'm burning fat or burning carbs, whatever. There's a lot of these things that tell you got to be focused on it, that you've got to worry and have anxiety over, I got to make sure I'm optimizing and keeping inflammation down and all these sorts of things. For the most part, no, it's needless worry. It's needless attention that's distracting you and causing you to work much harder for much smaller results. Excuse me, I drink my tea. So let's get into a couple of reasons why I don't do some of these things, but let's get to some questions. MK the Fit saying, what's the best mentality mindset to have while pursuing fitness? A growth mentality, my friend. We want to be eyes forward, looking at how do I just improve in some way? And it can be small little things, right? It could be something as simple as I'm going to leave my running shoes by the door. So that way, when I want to go for a run, it's easier for me to get ready in the morning. It could be something as simple as noticing, boy, if I keep my shoulders back in the bottom of a push-up, my chest works a lot better. Okay, I write down in my workout log, keep the shoulders back at the bottom, right? The growth mindset is what we want to have, just like anything in life, whether you want better relationships, making more money, improving business, whatever, is just kind of looking at what you're doing and don't bother, quote, doing it right. Right? A lot of the science-ing things is like, this is the right way to eat. This is the right and one correct way to exercise. That can lead you astray so far because it tells you there's one correct way or way you're supposed to be doing things, which usually isn't true. It can usually put you astray and lead you off the path. And it oftentimes will cause you to take your foot off the gas. Oh, my diet is right. I'm eating right. No need to improve it. Oh, I've got good push-up form. I'm using proper technique with my push-ups. No need to improve the push-ups. The moment you think you're doing it right, you stop looking to do it better. And you don't get results by doing it right. You get results by doing it better. So the growth mindset is key. That's a very insightful question. Thank you very much for asking it. One more before we jump in here. My apologies. Sorry, folks. Alex N saying, hey, Matt, I've watched your video on practicing upper body tension daily when you clasp your hands behind your back and move your shoulders back and forth. Yeah, liked it. What's similar can be done for the lower body? Standing on one leg. And I'm not saying like stand and pick up your leg like a flamingo or something like that. Stand on one leg and contract all of the muscles in that leg, particularly in your hips. Now, it's not so much about your mobility for this, but a lot of times we struggle to adequately and safely train our lower body because our neuromuscular connection with our lower body, particularly our hips, is really actually quite poor. So I'll do this regular. I'll just stand and I'll shift my weight onto one leg and I'll contract my glutes and my lateral hip and my inner thigh, my quads, my hamstrings, my calves, just kind of back and forth. Goes a long way for that sort of thing. And yeah, just shifting back and forth, standing on the one leg. So let's dive right in. Reasons why I gave up trying to, quote, science my way to results. First and foremost is that a lot of times these approaches that like the science says this is the best way to do things, it's like I said, factually true, it's correct, but it's usually picking on something that's a rather trivial influence, which means that, yeah, it's true, but it doesn't matter as much as they think. So a case in point, right? A lot of times I used to recommend to people, make sure that you're eating a whole lot when you come to it comes to diet, a lot of protein-rich foods, a lot of whole foods, complex carbohydrate kind of thing, rather than the processed stuff. Why? Because the more your body has to break down these complicated, more not simple foods, I guess you could say, the processed foods, the more energy you're going to expend. So you have a metabolic boost burning like whole wheat bread, like real whole wheat bread, as opposed to white bread, or burning and breaking down steak as opposed to something that's like white rice or something. Okay, so again, technically true, but what we're talking about here is an increase in your metabolic rate and your energy expenditure that is there, but we're talking about an increase of a percentage of your thermic effect of food, which is the energy you burn to consume and digest and utilize food, which is a relatively small influence to your overall caloric expenditure, which means that, sure, you are burning more calories if you eat steak versus white bread, but the difference in the net difference is so small, it really doesn't matter very much. It's like, okay, I burn 30 calories instead of 15. Now, again, percentages get thrown around a lot with people who are utilizing these sorts of things, trying to convince you got to follow my program. It's like, it's 100% increase in your metabolic rate for food. Yes, it's true, but we're talking about literally the equivalent of 2 potato chips here. It's usually these things are focusing on things that are true, but there's such a small, trivial influence that they're not really going to matter very much. And in order for it to matter very much, you've got to take these things to a massive extreme to have any hope of it actually doing anything for you. Case in point, Tim Ferriss, my favorite band name there, Tim Ferriss, in his 4-Hour Body, he came out with this graph, this little chart that said, okay, people who followed a high-fat diet, a high-carb diet, and a high-protein diet they lose this amount of weight, and the people on the very high fat diet lost the most amount of weight over like a 6 weeks period or something like that. But if you look at that graph or you look at that table, you're like, yeah, but they had to literally have a diet that, I think it was something absurd, like 80 or 90% of their caloric intake was fat, which makes me wonder, what in the world were they possibly eating? Just butter and olive oil? Good Lord. Versus like a regular average diet. And they lost, I think it was just 1 more pound over those 6 weeks. So I took the opposite lesson from that table that was in the book, because it was kind of making the example of, okay, make sure you have plenty of fat in your diet, and carbs are not going to help you, and yada, yada, yada. But I looked at it, I'm like, in order for it to matter, you've got to have such a massively extreme diet to have any difference whatsoever. And that brings me to number 2 for why I don't try a science, because usually these things focus on such a trivial small influence that it only matters in the extreme. And whenever we take our habits to an extreme, you're taking things to a very high level of work and cost. Because remember, a lot of times we fall for these things because they're deemed, quote, effective, which does matter if getting 0.1% of an improvement matters in your world. If you're an Olympic athlete, then yeah, 0.1% of a faster run time can make all the difference in the world. But for the majority of people, we don't have our fitness being applied in such extremes that amount is going to be even noticeable, but it could be very noticeable for the cost that we're spending for it. So when it comes to basing our choices off of what should I do, don't base it off what's effective, because starving on a deserted island can be an effective way for weight loss. But that doesn't mean it's what's going to actually work for you, because your body, your subconscious, and your lifestyle, you don't care what's effective. You care what's worth it. In other words, what are the things that you can do that are going to have a fairly high influence on the fundamental processes that are responsible for your results at the lowest perceived cost, the least amount of time, the least amount of effort, the least amount of work? Because what's going to ultimately work best for you is whatever has a bigger effect relative to low cost. I don't care if something's really effective. If it has a very, very high cost, you're simply not going to be able to stick to it. You're not going to want to do it, even if you could. So what's most important for the average Joe Schmo fitness enthusiast, which is what most of us are, is that the things we need to adopt are not what's effective, but what's worth it. What has the best influence, the best benefit to cost ratio, as I discuss in my latest book, Be Fit and Live Free. There's a whole chapter in here how your success depends entirely on that. And so you can show me all the research in the world why a particular way to, quote, science your metabolism or your hormone levels or anything is going to be effective. But I'm always also asking, yeah, but at what cost? Because if you're ignoring the cost, you're still probably going to screw yourself over, because the stuff that works for you isn't the stuff that's effective. It's the stuff that's worth it. And typically these ways of trying to hack and science our way are such a low influence at such a high cost that they're not worth it, which is why they're basically just a pain in the butt for low things. You're basically working for less than minimum wage in the fitness community. So those are the 2 biggest reasons why I don't try to science these things anymore, because they're not worth it. It's such a small little influence that doesn't matter unless I can take it to a huge extreme, in which case I'm literally creating diet and exercise habits that are so overwhelming they're a, quote, lifestyle, which is not the way I want to live my life. I don't want to live my life according to the rules of a diet. I don't want to live my life according to the rules of a workout program. I'd rather be doing much better and more important things with my life. So when we're looking at the things that are most important, we want to look at the things that have a low cost and high benefit ratio. And typically these things that are the cutting edge, oh, this is how you optimize your hormone profile, and this is how you increase your metabolism, and with this diet and stuff, those things are almost always very low influence, very high cost type of approaches. Let's get to a couple more questions here. Philip, good to see you. Hey, Matt, unfortunately, I can't join live stream this time, but I am already excited to listen to the audio file tomorrow. Yeah, folks, I post these things on the audio. And again, my apologies, Philip. I know I usually do these on Saturday, but my bronchitis was destroying my voice yesterday. It you would not have wanted to listen to me yesterday. So that's why I pushed it to today. But thanks for getting the information on the mind-muscle connection. My pleasure, my friend. All right. One more here. I'm on saying, any tips on symmetrical tension in muscles when doing compound movements? A couple things to notice here. So first and foremost is you're always going to be a little asymmetrical whenever you're doing compound movements. You're always going to have one side that's a little different than the other. If you are very balanced and symmetrical, that doesn't mean you're going to feel the same on both sides. It usually means whatever feels better or stronger or more stable just keeps switching back and forth between the two sides. So a lot of times it basically just boils down to being aware of it and trying to balance it out. So if you're doing push-ups and you're like, oh, I feel it so much more in my left chest, that's an opportunity to investigate why. Good opportunity also to videotape yourself. You can observe a lot by watching. So have someone film you on your smartphone and then look and be like, what's different? Is your elbow out more? Is your shoulder up a little bit more? Is your body position shifting around? Are you just simply engaging the muscle better? Try to balance it out in your technique and your application. And that's going to be more about leveling things out. And also unilateral exercise is a gold mine for this stuff. If you're doing arch or push-ups, you're like, wow, my left side feels way different than my right. Okay, investigate why. Where's the difference? Why is the difference happening? And then work on going back and forth with that. What is different? And then work on it. So reason number 3 here is, I'm not trying to quote science my way, is a lot of times these changes not only being trivial, but are too acute to really matter in the big picture of things. Okay, so let me give you an example here where there was that idea of if you lift big and heavy with compound movements, that's going to create a spike in testosterone, in your hormone levels. And this is one I used to believe and preach for years myself, but particularly back when I was doing a lot of the heavier, like power building kind of days, a lot of deadlifts, a lot of squats, a lot of bench press and stuff, because it's like big, heavy lifts, they spike your testosterone level. And so that's what I'm after. Sounds good, right? It always sounds good. Everybody's like, oh, you burn more fat. I'm in. Boosts your testosterone. I'm in. Increases your metabolism. I'm in, right? It always sounds good. But there's so much nuance that's never discussed and swept under the rug. It's like, yeah, but does that matter? And in the case of like lift heavy, boost your testosterone, it's such a short period of time that you have a boost. First off, the boost really isn't that significant. It's so short that it doesn't really affect your overall testosterone level, which is more important. And I've even seen some folks out there who point to research that says, yes, you have a boost in your testosterone level, and then your testosterone level actually drops afterwards as your body regains homeostasis. So again, we get fooled into the marketing of these things. Burning fat sounds good. Increase your metabolism sounds awesome. Increase your muscle protein synthesis, sign me up. Increases testosterone, great. But really, these things are used to lure us into believing these ideas and programs that people are selling. And in the long run, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't matter. Increase your testosterone, great, for such a short period of time that it really doesn't even matter. Oh, crap. Burn fat, awesome. But it's not really implicated towards weight loss or actually fat loss. Oh, so a lot of this stuff sounds good on paper. It sounds enticing, but when you look under the hood and you really like, okay, but what does that mean for the actual result? So many times it's like, yeah, but it doesn't really matter very much. Oh, well, to hell with it then. It doesn't matter. So this is how we often get led astray, which is why I'm always kind of harping on, like, I don't care what my testosterone level does during the workout. I don't give a damn if I'm burning fat or carbs or whatnot. Because in the general overall scheme of things, my ability to build muscle still boils down to, can I progressively work my muscle against resistance? My ability to be lean or lose fat still comes down to, am I in a general caloric deficit, right? And all the little details of like, you're burning fat, you're increasing testosterone, your metabolism's increasing stuff. Usually that just doesn't matter. It's too small. It's too acute of a change. And again, there's often a lot of times compensatory behaviors afterwards from the body to regain homeostasis. Let me give you another example. This idea of like, well, if you do really hard, intense exercise, Then you have EPOC, excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption, which means you're burning more fat and calories after your workout. Whole programs are based on this, right? Don't go for a 5-mile jog, run hill sprints instead, because the intense stuff means that your EPOC is bigger. Yes, technically true. Does it matter? No, because yes, you do have an increase in your normal metabolic rate and you're burning more fat and calories afterwards, but usually it's such a small duration of time that it doesn't matter. And basically, it's kind of like if you took a weight plate on a gym floor, like a hard floor, and you pushed it for 5 feet and then you shoved it off and you expected it to keep coasting for another 500 feet. No, it's going to go forward a few more inches and then stop. That's all it does. So a lot of times we think these things are bigger than they really are. And even that, sometimes it can be. Like one of the studies that people often cite, it's like, well, these people were burning tons of fat and calories 48 hours afterwards. Yeah, because they were old and they were weak and they were out of shape. And you put them through a workout that basically beat them within an inch of their life. So yes, their body was burning an increase of fat and calories for days afterwards. But they were so beat up that they didn't want to do anything. They were on the couch the whole time. And their appetite shot through the moon. So they were eating like crazy. So again, you've got these compensatory things that balance it all out. And even though you focus on one half of it, like, oh, their metabolism was increased for 48 hours. Yeah, but they had so much compensatory habits afterwards that it all just kind of came out in the wash and didn't matter anyway. So that's one of the reasons why, we got to look at these things of, does it even matter? And even if it does, are we compensating? Because a lot of times we are. Excuse me, a cough here. Got my tea here, folks. Penguin's coming on saying, Matt, I don't feel my shoulders tired during overcoming isometric shoulder press. Starting position. Okay, change your position. All right. Change what is tiring is what I would ask. So what are you using? But make sure your shoulders are back. You're engaging your back. Okay. Make sure your elbows are in a little bit. You have a direct press into the handle. So your arms aren't like this. You don't want an angle with your forearms. You want to have your forearm directly driving against the handle, and focus on pressing upwards and kind of like driving your elbows up rather than just your hands. And you don't necessarily need to feel like the shoulders are getting super, super fatigued, but you do want to make sure they are working. So hopefully that is the case. One more by Joseph Bello coming. Hey, Matt, I've been working my legs with squats and lunges. Yep, been very proud of your progress. I want to know, how should I progress that workout besides using weights? So there's always technique. Are you getting more weight on your front leg when you're doing your lunges? Depth, range of motion, muscle engagement, time, duration. But what are you trying to progress is the big question, though. Because there's always various things that we can advance and progress whenever we're training. The important thing is, what do you want to progress? And how does that relate to your goals? Don't just take progression for progression's sake. Another reason for kind of pairing along with what I was just talking about is that I'm not trying to quote science things, is a lot of times when we have a change and stuff, is like, okay, I'm eating this way differently. I'm changing this about my workout and everything like that. And it can work, but a lot of times it doesn't do anything different from any other method. There's nothing special about it, which is important to recognize, because a lot of times people will champion their method. Like, this is the right way to lift. This is the right way to do things. But fundamentally, you're having the same impact. And this happens a lot in our fitness culture, where we think we're doing something different because superficially it feels like we're doing something different. Change my workout this way, change my diet this way. But on the fundamental level, you're still doing the same thing. You're still in a caloric deficit. You're still working your muscles against progressive resistance. You're still training your body to be able to jump high, even though you're using a different kind of plyo box and stuff. So a lot of times we get lost in the superficial details that can change, quote, the flavor of what we're doing. But fundamentally, it's not doing anything different, which is actually a good thing, because that means it can still be effective. If it doesn't do the same thing in the fundamental level as anything else, well, it doesn't work, because everything works for the same fundamental reasons. Every method of strength training, every diet, every method of weight loss, they all work for the same fundamental reasons. But when we get caught up in this is, the one correct way to do it, or this super complicated way of approaching things. We get stuck into thinking that there's one proper way of doing it, not recognizing that no, you're still just doing the same thing as everything else. You just made it really complicated on yourself, which means you're probably putting in more work than necessary. Another reason I'm not trying to science my way is not only do a lot of these methods focus on relatively small, trivial influences that don't really matter that much and come at a high cost, a lot of times they cause you to ignore or turn your attention away from big things that are much more important. Okay, so let me give you an example. The whole idea of like, oh, your hormones are at different levels. Your testosterone level is, I think I read somewhere, it's like your testosterone level is higher in the morning. So I thought to myself, well, that means I should be lifting and working out in the morning. Problem is, I'm not a morning person. Right? It takes me quite a while to get going and stuff. Plus, with my job as a coach and a trainer, I usually work fairly early mornings. So there was a period where I was forcing myself to wake up earlier, usually getting less sleep, and going to the gym and like, well, this is the best time for me to work out to optimize my hormone profile. So therefore, I've got to be working out at this time. So in this attempt to try to focus on this trivial thing of like, yeah, my testosterone level is higher in the morning, la-di-da, not even asking whether or not that even matters, not really. But I was ignoring the fact that I was getting less sleep, and I was ignoring the fact that my energy level, my focus, and my motivation was much higher later in the day. So naturally, I would have put a lot more into my workouts if I worked out around lunchtime, for example. But I was going off that one piece of information that was like, well, my testosterone level is lower in lunchtime or later in the day. So that would kill your gains, bro, and everything like that. It's like, no, if that's when you feel best, that's when you should be training. Oh, it works. It's easier on my schedule too. I'm more consistent with my workouts. I'm able to really focus. And plus, my best friend works out then. So we can work out together and we can push each other. All of those things were far more important to my workout success than what my hormone level was for like 2 hours in the morning. So I was focusing on trying to optimize a trivial thing and ignoring other things that were much bigger and much more important. And not only is it just bigger things, but also your personal alignment. Again, shameless plug, my latest book, I talk about in a chapter how your personal alignment is far more important for your results than any sort of optimization according to science. Doing the things that's best for you is best for your results, even if someone's like, oh no, if you work out late at night, that's going to not be optimal for your hormone profile and your workout performance and everything like that. I don't care. If you came to me and you're like, I just feel better working out at night. It's easier on my schedule. It's easier for me to just focus and just de-stress at the end of the day if I'm doing my pull-ups later on at night. Well, that is more than enough reason to be doing it at night. But the science and research, no, that one type of research says, and don't forget, folks, 9 times out of 10, we're not actually getting exposed to the actual scientific research. We're getting exposed to media that's reporting on the research, which usually, again, warps and distorts it all out of fruition. And it's crazy how often that research isn't even suggesting the things that the media is trying to hype up. So when we're looking at trying to get the better results, it's usually a lot more important to focus on your personal alignment rather than what science suggests is some sort of optimization for your metabolism or your hormones or whatever. If you just feel better and you can bring more to the table, eating and training a certain way, that's probably going to be far more effective, even though it's not, quote, optimal according to some research study that someone's trying to use to sell their program for. So here's a case example. Looping Dope saying, my friend follows Nippard, which is a cool dude, school of thought where exercising is mainly highly scientific, as it is, but it depends on your use of it. He doesn't do full range of motion in some exercise because it's pointless for muscle mass. No, of course it's not. I mean, look at, Dr. I can never pronounce his name, Izzeltelli. He goes the opposite side. He's like, well, my science says that full range of motion is essential for muscle mass and stuff. At the end of the day, does it really matter? Generally, no. You just get the muscle working against progressive resistance. That's the most important thing. Now, I, for one, champion full range of motion or bigger range of motion, because honestly, full range of motion is complete BS. You're almost never using the full range of motion of the muscle. Usually you're going with the full range of motion of the exercise. Okay, if you get down ass to grass in a squat, your quads are not full range of motion because one of your quadriceps especially is kind of almost shortening a little bit because it's a hip flexor. Sissy squats are much bigger range of motion for that particular quadricep muscle than regular squats are. So whenever we're looking at range of motion, remember, it's all subjective to what we're doing for an exercise anyway. But in general, my utilization experience is just more range brings more benefit. You're just going to get more from the exercise, more mobility, more improvement on tension control, as long as you're working on it, more stability. Usually, I used to be on short range of motion team short range myself. I always like, don't go down below 90 degrees with your elbow. Don't go down below 90 degrees with your knees. And so I did that for years. And again, the science says this, the science says that and everything. Is it possible to build muscle and strength with short range of motion? Absolutely. Does that mean that full range is essential? Absolutely not. I mean, hell, we do isometrics here. That's no range of motion, right? And that's very effective. But in general, you're just going to get more from the exercise. It's harder. It's more challenging. It requires more out of your abilities and proficiencies and everything. So in general, it's very good. And, Nippard could be like, well, these people did full range of motion. They didn't build any more muscle. Like I care, like it even matters, right? Are we working the muscle progressively? That's all we need to make sure is happening. All the other stuff, trivial details. And then again, it's much more important to work with your personal alignment than anything else. I worked with a guy one time who had an oblong hip. It was a birth defect in his hip. He could not squat lower. He couldn't get to parallel. He could barely get down below 20 degrees. It's like, well, we got to load you up like crazy on the barbell then because it's going to be so easy. You need a lot of weight. But he just could not do it. He literally had skeletal bone structure that prevented him from getting into a deep squat. So was I like, well, you can't get full range of motion, therefore you're wasting your time? No, it's like, all right, fine, you got that limitation. We'll just work with it. As long as we just keep working the muscle under progressive resistance, we'll still get the same result. Why? Because it's the same fundamental stimulus. And therefore, you're going to create the same result. Generally, though, you're going to get more from more range. And don't get caught up in these debates back and forth. 9 times out of 10, the more important thing is, what is better for you? What do you like to do? What works better for your body? What works better for your preferences and your abilities? That's the stuff you should base your choices off of. Not what some jack-off YouTuber like me says is best. Experiment. Do things for yourself. And then if you're like, well, I'm certainly feeling a lot better if I do it this way, well, then you do it that way. Case closed. Zaid saying, are you receiving my comments? Absolutely, sir. Always do. But today I've got a lot to talk about, so I'm not addressing the comments as much as I usually do. Because I've got to watch myself in watching the replays on some of these. I recognize I get so much into the comments that sometimes I get way off topic on what I wanted to talk about that day. So I'm not trying to ignore you or anything. We got a lot to talk about, little time to do it. That, and I'm hoping my voice holds up. Oh, man. Excuse me, folks. I tell you, I've been sick for over a month now. It has not been a fun way to go about things. Okay, covered extreme habits. Very good. Another example here of high effort but low benefit to it was the anabolic window that I fell for. I was always like, okay, right after working out, you've got to have a protein shake, or you got to have protein and carb source right after your workout. I literally knew a guy one time. He was working out so hard that he'd have his protein shake ready, like next to him. He'd do his squats and then literally just start chugging it down. Because he's like, I got to hit that anabolic window. I got to get things in right away. Again, it's based on real truth. I learned this back in my college classes and nutrition and sports science. They were always like, okay, anabolic window kind of thing. But then, of course, the research says, yeah, as long as you're getting some nutrition and some sustenance within, it's not even 20 minutes. It was like something like 15 hours or something. Then then you're good. But this guy literally would chug down his protein shake so quick sometimes to hit that anabolic window that probably I would say maybe 2 out of 5 times he'd have to run to the bathroom and then he'd throw it up because it was literally hitting the squats and then chugging it down. And that's an example, again, of really high effort. He's putting a lot into it, really risking literal illness in order to optimize this one thing, when in reality it should have been like, well, go home, stretch out, relax, and you're probably going to be eating within the next few hours anyway, just a regular meal. So do that. And that's the other point on these sorts of things that kind of goes crazy is a lot of times these things are like, okay, according to the science and the research, you've got to have all these optimizations and stuff. But the funny thing is, a lot of times the things that they would recommend were just basic healthy habits anyway. Like, okay, optimizing your hormone profile. Here's the way to get it all dialed in. And it's like, drink water, get plenty of sleep, lift heavy things, be active, minimize stress. I'm like, yeah, I'm already doing that stuff. That's just general healthy lifestyle stuff. And the number of times that people would be like, okay, here's how to get your muscle protein synthesis to really dial in. It's like, yeah, lift heavy, get protein throughout the day, and get plenty of sleep. It's like, duh. Like, yeah, of course, I'm doing that anyway. So a lot of times these recommendations, again, unless they're extreme, because they usually have to be to have any sort of real effect, a lot of these things recommend lifestyle and diet and exercise habits you're doing anyway. I mean, can you imagine? It's like, okay, if you lift really heavy, then you're creating a huge spike in your testosterone level. Really? Okay, great. Hey, Jim, listen to this. We should be lifting heavy. We've been doing that for years. Oh, yeah. Oh, never mind then. Just keep going. Because that's what usually happens. It's like you're doing the same thing anyway. You're just going to do the same habit that they recommend anyway. Eat whole natural foods, a lot of variety, drink plenty of water, be active. Don't drive yourself into crushing yourself into the ground every time with your workout. Yeah, just basically do healthy stuff. It doesn't change anything. Like, yeah, okay. I just read this whole research report, listened to these podcasts and stuff, and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing anyway. It's just called living a healthy life. The exception, of course, is, again, unless you're going to extremes with things. And oftentimes what that means is, all right, I'm optimizing this one thing, but I'm sacrificing 15 other things, right? And that's where things can really get haywire. And you find this a lot in diets. You find this a lot in workouts. Like, okay, let's go to this extreme level. We're going to just basically push ourselves into the ground, or we're going to eat nothing but steak and butter, or we're going to eat, or we're going to sleep like 3-hour chunks or whatever. It's like, okay, we're optimizing this one little thing that doesn't really matter, but we're compromising 10 other things that do matter. And that is, robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's penny wise, but pound foolish. You're sacrificing normal, general things that make a big difference in order to, quote, optimize. Even if you probably aren't, optimize this one thing. Kate, range of motion is a big example. We were just talking about it. If someone's like, oh my gosh, I've got to maximize my range of motion, but you go so light, or you're focused so much on having the perfect technique that you're robbing all focus and intensity out of your workout. Okay, you're trying to maximize this one thing, which you already had to a pretty good degree anyway, and you're compromising all this other stuff. So it's not so much about what are you achieving, but what are you giving up? What are you sacrificing? And if you're sacrificing and giving up a lot for this one thing that probably doesn't matter very much, you're going backwards. And it's penny wise, pound foolish, as I was saying. Here's another example. Larry Noletti, it's good to talk to you, man. Hey, Matt, what's your opinion on slow reps with deep breathing and more intensing for increased intensity? So this was a common thing that I didn't really fall for it, but a buddy of mine did that I used to train with. And he was always very much about like have a real slow eccentric motion. So all of his clients were training the same way, where they would pull hard and then they'd lower the weight real slowly, and then they would lift it and lower it real slowly. Because he was always like, well, the eccentric is when we have the most muscle damage, so we want to maximize the eccentric. And again, it's kind of this Monty Python type of reasoning. I'm sure there's an actual name for this type of thing, but you know, that Monty Python Holy Grail scene where they're weighing the woman against the duck to see if she's a witch, you know, where it's like, well, what do ducks do? Well, they float. Okay. What also floats? Wood. Okay. Well, wood also does what? It burns. And what do witches also do? Burn. Therefore, if she weighs the same as the duck, she's a witch. Now, if you notice, every step in that line of reasoning was true, but it led to a completely false premise. Well, it happens all the time in fitness too. It's like, okay, if we have more muscle damage, if we slow down the eccentric, are we getting more muscle damage? Maybe. If we get more muscle damage, we have more muscle protein synthesis. Maybe. If we have more muscle protein synthesis, will we build more muscle? Maybe. But every one of those is possibly, but we're kind of crossing our fingers and hoping it just pans out. And a lot of times, again, in science will later say, it's like, yeah, it doesn't really do anything. I mean, gosh, I've been one of my true simple vices that I have in my life is diet soda. The number of times that people have told me, oh my gosh, diet soda is going to make you fat. Diet soda is going to make you fat. And it was based on the same sort of things. It does this to the body, therefore this will happen, therefore this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, this will. It's like, yeah, but none of that stuff is happening. So why would I believe you? It's according to the science. No, it's according to the media that's reporting on a shred of science that they didn't even understand, that you're now telling me I shouldn't be drinking my Diet Coke, even though I've been doing it for years and it's never had any effect on me. I've given it up for months at a time. I've drunk it for months at a time. Never had any effect on me. So why would I pay attention to you? Because at the end of the day, what really does matter is a result. Is it actually working? I don't care what the science suggests. Are you actually getting a result or something happening from it? And if we're really going slow, we're really deep breathing, it can make the exercise feel different. It can make it feel a lot more different. But are you getting stronger in the movement? Because we can modify workouts 100 different ways that make it harder without any impact whatsoever. And that's why we want to focus on what is it doing on the fundamental level. If you lift slower, is it creating more tension in the muscle? No, because you have the same level of resistance. In fact, you could certainly argue that you'll get more tension if you lift faster, because that's how physics works. If you try to move an object with more force, it creates more tension in the muscle. Deep breathing. Well, again, dude, you already breathe. Like you should be breathing during your workouts. You know, that's one of the things I'm always telling people, breathe, you know, because if you're trying to breathe and you're like this, then no, I mean, do you get more benefit if you really breathing to the point where you're about to pass out? No. So again, all these sorts of things, like, are they variables we can play with? Yes. Do they matter? Probably not, because they don't really do anything on a fundamental level. You should be breathing deep. Of course, it's called exercise, right? Tensing for increasing tensing. Oh, gee, look at this. I'm supposed to be tensing my muscles. Who would have thought, right? Of course you're supposed to be tensing your muscles. I've got whole books here on how to improve how well you can tense your muscles. That's the whole point of exercise. So we've got three things here. We've got speed, we've got breathing, we've got tensing. All three things matter. All three things should have been there anyway. Are you going to have anything happen with these three things coming together? Probably not. Probably not, because you're probably not having that much of an effect on your fundamental level. And if you are, it usually means probably you weren't doing something right to begin with. But that doesn't mean you need to go super slow, that you need to be super breathing. And tension control is very important. But a lot of times when people come to it from my stuff, they're like, I've got to be really, really tight and tense when I'm doing push-ups. No, you don't need that. You just need to make sure you're contracting the muscle proactively rather than reactively. You don't need to look like you're trying to pass a kidney stone. Zaid saying, hey, Matt, shifting to a partition instead of a room. Oh, yes. I don't have a place to hang my portable bar. Is it possible to train FL? Why am I blanking on that? Anyway, and pull-ups on high parallels progressively with practical means. You got to get really creative about it. But as I always said, got to have a place to hang. Buy one, make one, or find one when it comes to calisthenics. If you have a temporary situation where you can't have a place to hang, don't worry about it. But if you're practicing, body weight training, and you're like, I don't have a place to hang. Well, then buy one, make one, or find one. I got tons of DIY stuff on my channel. I got equipment recommendations up the wazoo on my on reddeltaproject.com, stuff that's affordable and stuff. Find a way. Find a way. It's just that simple. and being able to get that sort of thing is essential. Okay, let me see. Take a look at my notes if I missed anything. Doesn't change. Yeah, I think I covered most of the basics here that I wanted to talk about. So, but again, I want to reiterate, it's like, does this mean that the science is important? Of course, it's very important. But a lot of times when we get so fixated in a narrow range of something, it's like, this is the food to eat in order to optimize your testosterone or stuff. It's usually such a narrow perspective that it's too trivial. It's too extreme in order to make anything happen. Too much work and effort, ignores other things that are much more important, pulls you out of personal alignment, and in the end of the day, is just a lot of work for not a whole lot of things. Instead, focusing on how do you influence for yourself the fundamental processes that are best for you. That by far is more important. That by far is much more important than any sort of like optimization, trivial little superficial stuff. Like if you want to lose weight, all right, so how am I going to be able to manage my caloric intake and increase my caloric expenditure? And I know I don't give a whole lot of specific programs and advices and stuff, because I truly do believe that most people, when they understand what they need to do on a fundamental level, they're going to be able to come up with methods that are going to be best for them than anything they're going to find on the internet. Because this is how human beings work. It's one of the fundamental things about human behavior that is such an amazing superpower that our fitness culture actually discourages you from using. It's the law of attention, not the law of attraction, the law of attention. The law of attention is insanely powerful, because when you set your attention towards solving a problem or figuring something out or even just finding something, your subconscious literally starts finding opportunities out of thin air for that. Let me give you an example. We've all been here before, right? You're in a public place, never been there before. You don't really know the lay of the land, like an airport during a layover or something. You really got to go to the bathroom. You're like, oh man, I really got to piss like a racehorse and stuff. Suddenly your attention tunes that radar towards anything in your vicinity that says there's a bathroom here. You're looking for men, women signs. You're looking for the little signs that show a man and woman kind of thing. You're looking for the restrooms. You're looking around. Suddenly your eyes are like, rest stop or something. It's like your attention is so fixated on finding a bathroom that you're going to be able to pick it out of thin air. You would have never seen it or noticed it before, but your attention is now tuned towards that sort of thing. And that's exactly how fitness works. When we understand the processes of fitness and how it actually works, and your attention starts tuned to, okay, so how do I do these things for myself? You're going to come up with way better programs and ideas than anything you'll find on the internet. And the role of workouts like I have in my books or diets and stuff like that is just to give you a general template on what you can start with. But you're supposed to change things and modify things. I get emails and questions all the time on my Instagram. People are like, okay, I started off on this diet or this program or something, but I feel like I want to make this change. Almost always I say, yeah, make that change. Chances are very good, because your attention is now tuned to what you should be doing, that making that change is going to be very beneficial for you. And that's what you want to be focusing on instead of, well, this person says, the research says this is the best way to do this and stuff. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. If you know that's going to go against your personal alignment and not really have much of an impact on things on the fundamental level, then why bother with it? Because remember, my friends, this whole fitness thing only works if it gets easier over time, not harder. It only works if we find ways to be more effective with less work, because that's how everything in life works. The only way you can get better at producing any sort of result in anything is, how do I do this with less work, or the same amount of work is more productive? It's the only way we've had success in anything in life. And fitness is certainly no exception to that. Last couple of questions before I sign out. Dan Osek, good to see you as always. Hey, Matt, just read Be Fit, Live Free for the third time. Best takeaway for me was understanding intuitive training. If my Isomax program calls for 3 sets, I'll do more if the energy is there, less if not. Freedom. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Adaptive training. Adaptive training is huge. Again, people are like, well, this is the optimal number of sets and reps you should be doing. This is the optimal number. There are so many variables that come into play regarding how much work you should do in your workouts that any number I give you to stick to is going to be a guessing game. Right now, usually when I'm training people, I'll give 3 sets just because I got to conform to the hour program that we usually have with over at Capra and stuff. But yeah, if you have the time, energy, and motivation to do more by all means. No, your cortisol is going to spike, and if your training takes longer than this and that, and who cares? Doesn't matter. If you can have a bigger impact, a bigger influence on the fundamental process that's responsible for your result, you will get better results, even if it's going, quote, against the science, because the research is not in charge. Mother Nature is in charge. We're just trying to figure out how the hell it works, right? And we still don't understand a lot. We're still trying to understand how people work, and you need to know both, absolutely. So the adaptive qualities of eating and training stuff means do what's best for you in your circumstances, because that's probably going to produce better results rather than going, and conforming to a optimal formula. Andre saying, the faster you lift, the more momentum and less work will be done by each muscle fiber. Not initially, though. However, as long as you're training to failure, it doesn't matter for results. Correct if you are training and creating high fatigue in the muscle is the stimulus you're going for. It does matter for your joints, potentially. It depends on the programming, depends on your activation, depends on your ability to cushion your joints and stuff. So there's a lot of nuance to unpack there. Every single one of those is, well, it depends. Well, sometimes, but maybe not, but kind of, but sort. And that's the messiness that is fitness. A equals X. Usually that's just more of a simple, oversimplified way that's ignoring things for the ability to try and simplify things that aren't really quite as simple. Jalen Ingram saying application is important as well. It doesn't let all this information sit on the wall. Yeah. So it's also about cherry picking too. It's also about going after the things that are important to you specifically. So let's use the before example. Okay, fast lifting. Okay, power, explosiveness. Does it matter to you? Well, what kind of application are we going after? Now, if you want to train for power and explosiveness, then yeah, going fast, definitely in alignment with your goals. And you're going to create a lot more tension in your muscle to create that momentum. Because you're right, less work will be done by each muscle fiber during the period where you have momentum, but not to create the momentum. There's a lot more work in the muscle fibers to create the momentum, but then during the momentum, yes, there's a lot less work there. Does that matter for what you're trying to do? If your objective is power and explosiveness, then it's important. If your goal is long endurance, being able to keep a muscle contracted, then it's counterproductive. So it depends on what you're going after. As long as you're going to failure, okay, fatigue in the muscle. Yes, trying to stimulate hypertrophy. Yeah, classic example of what I was talking about earlier. As long as you're still creating the basic fundamental stimulus, you're getting the same result either way. Absolutely. But it depends on what that fundamental stimulus you're going after is and so forth. But good or bad for the joints. Well, there's a million things that can impact the amount of stress on your joints for any type of training. I've had people ruin their knees walking, right? So when we look at something like it's bad for the joints, depends. It depends on the application. It depends on how you're programming things. So when we're looking at what we're trying to do, it always boils down to what is the goal that you're after? What is the fundamental process you need to influence to get to that goal? And then what is the best way for you personally to influence that process? Because that's going to be the easiest and most effective way for you to do it. And when we get caught up in trying to quote science things, that usually goes against your personal alignment. It usually ignores the bigger influences on that process that's going to have a much bigger impact. And it often can even have no relevance to your goal and pull you away from your goal. Kind of like if you were an archer and they're like, well, the science says if you aim high, you're always going to hit better targets. Great, I'm aiming high. It's like, but the target's down there. Well, I'm going to ignore that. The science says I should be aiming high. It's like, well, if the target was further away, then yes, but it's 50 yards ahead of you. you're going to shoot over the target. So there's a lot of these things we've got to kind of take into account for these sorts of things. But anyway, folks, I am very happy that you all came on and talked. I always appreciate your questions and thoughts. As always, the audio for these is reposted on the podcast directory of choice, and I will try to get the next episode up and running live next Saturday instead of Sunday. Hopefully, I'm definitely on the tail end of this bronchitis sort of thing. But thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. As always, don't forget all the resources and everything I was talking about, equipment, resources, books, my programs and stuff, reddeltaproject.com. Link is down below if you want to just click on that. And as always, the likes, the reviews, the more reviews, if you find this stuff helpful, other people are as well. It's really good karma to kind of spread things around in the reviews on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this sort of thing. Boy, that was a dated reference, wasn't it? Will certainly help me in the show, and I do sincerely appreciate it. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you next week. Till then, be fit and live free.